My whole life is this kind of stream of how did I get here moments for like the last 8 months, including this one, which I'm weirdly nervous about, which considering last week I was standing about to go on stage at the TIFF Lightbox talking to John Tory and Doug Ford about our ties as I was getting ready to go out in front of thousands of people and however many were watching it on the internet and try and point out how wrong they were on multiple topics. So talking to a fairly small group of people should not be making me nervous, but it is. So many people have told funny stories tonight, and, well, mine isn't one of them. When I was 5 years old, I wanted to be the queen of everything. I had the privilege of growing up in a world that my parents built for me that was full of people who took me incredibly seriously, and a world where I felt anything was possible. And that's a privilege I am still extremely grateful for. I didn't really understand what this would have meant at the time. I didn't understand that if I wanted to be queen of everything, that meant I had to hold all of the hardships of the world on my shoulders. I kind of just thought if I could be in charge, I could fix everything and it would just all magically be perfect. At 5, I wasn't brave to want to be the queen of everything. I was fearless, which was a completely different thing. So when I was 18, not very long ago at all, I had much wider eyes, and I understood what being mayor of Toronto would mean, and I understood that I would have to hold all of the hardship in this city on my shoulders, and I still wasn't scared, but that also meant I couldn't be brave. But if I've learned something in the last 8 months is that no matter how small a public figure you may be, people will project onto you. And so I've heard a lot in the last 8 months, things like, "You're so brave. I couldn't imagine doing what you're doing." Or, "How do you stand up and do those things? It's very, very brave." And don't get me wrong, there have been moments of bravery in the last 8 months, but the act of running for mayor was not one of them. I understood what I was getting into. I mean, it didn't take everything in me to walk in and sign those papers and pay my $200, and it didn't take everything in me to speak to reporters, and it doesn't take everything in me to shake hands with people. I don't find those things scary, which is not to say no one does, but I don't. But I'm going to tell you about a time I was scared and a time I was brave in the last 8 months. Late at night on May 26th, it was somewhere in the very early days of the Yes All Women hashtag campaign. I posted a collection of screenshots to my Tumblr account. Screenshots of messages I had received, advances from men I didn't know. And those messages had made me feel not like a political candidate, which was this beautiful thing I had been allowed to feel like for the first couple months, but like a character in a show that people could just treat however they liked. The voices of the Yes All Women campaign and the stories I read there on Twitter and on Tumblr and in so many other places made me feel less alone. And I hoped that by being honest about what I was feeling and how I was treated in the last few months, I could help someone else feel less alone. It took a lot to post those screenshots. I was careful to remove any identifying information at all from them before I posted them, but I was terrified. After I did it and I reposted them to Twitter, I closed my computer and I turned off my phone and I went to sleep, hoping that when I woke up, everything would still be okay in my life. And the next morning when I woke up, I was able to breathe a sigh of relief. The reaction had mostly been either non-existent or positive. There were many messages of support and retweets and reblogs, and people were very kind. It wasn't until that afternoon I was sitting in Indigenous Government Studies. Can you tell I went to alternative school? And I opened my computer, and something weird had happened. It had been a long time since I had had several hundred Twitter notifications. and I was a little confused, another reaction had happened. A man had decided to harass me on Twitter, an experience I'm sure many women who have decided to speak their minds online know far too well. He decided to attack everything about me, my clothes, my personality, my decision to run, my decision to share these pictures, my lack of a public romantic relationship, which was a weird one, my body, my hair, my lipstick, everything. Which, as someone who a long time ago, and a long time ago is very relative in this case, was the kind of 12-year-old with a buzz cut and a picture of Sinead O'Connor in her locker who gave no cares at all about the opinions of other people, I was surprised at how hurt I was. I was really, really hurt. And to this day, I don't have a good answer as to why it was that particular day or this particular man's words, because it wasn't anything I hadn't heard before from other people, including people who were closer to me than this person I had never met on the other side of a computer screen. And this was a moment I was very glad I had chosen to do my 5th year at an alternative school, because I was able just to close my computer and walk out of class. And I walked out of class, and I walked out the front doors of my school, and I broke into tears, which I don't cry very often, and I think many people feel this way, but crying often feels like either a release or like your body betraying you. And in this case, unfortunately, it felt like the latter, and I felt so betrayed by my emotions and my body, allowing them to be shown to the world. And at this moment, I was very glad that my tiny, itsy-bitsy alternative school was also in a very silent part of town. I walked around my school several times, crying, and I stopped outside the fence, I don't know why, and I looked up and I realized that there was a door marked girls. And I realized that no matter how hurt I felt or how upset I was or how angry I was, I had to keep going. That a long time ago someone had thought for me to be able to walk in whatever door of the school I wanted, that I didn't have to enter at a specific time, that I didn't have to play separately from my male classmates, not that we had recess, but. And I was standing outside the second elementary school that was ever built in Toronto, one of the oldest buildings in the city and one of the oldest public buildings. And it was a powerful moment that someone had fought for me to be able to stand there. So I walked back into school and I sat down and I took my notes on Indigenous self-governance and I wrote emails back to reporters saying, yes, I would do the interviews. And I went home and I cried once more and I ate dinner with my family and I did my interviews and I went to a meeting on scouting because that was my life. And then I didn't drop out. I didn't withdraw, even though in many ways I really wanted to. And that moment and that day is not one I talk about a lot. In politics, you're not supposed to talk about the vulnerable moments, and we'll see how this plays out. You never quite know in politics. But it was, for me, a moment really of bravery, which I hadn't felt so intensely before. And for me, I stayed because yesterday there was a girl having a conversation with her teacher about how to write my name into her ballot at student vote later in October because she didn't feel good about any of the candidates that were allowed to be on the ballot for her student vote. Because there was a girl who wrote me a letter from New Zealand just days after the day I just spoke about, who felt her dream was possible of representing her country one day because I had said that mine was possible. Because I have to answer questions like, are women who wear headscarves allowed to be mayor? Because I have to answer questions from little girls who don't understand why the stoves don't work in their TCHC buildings. I continue to receive an outpouring of support, which was incredible for me, but I also it was, for me, a lesson in not how awful people could be in the world, which was something I already knew all too well, but it was a lesson in how wonderful people could be. That day was really hard for me, but what made it easier was there were people who stood up for me, who stood beside me, who walked behind me, who supported me. And I never want another young woman to feel like I felt, though I'm sure there will be more behind me, and I'm sure there will be young women who feel all sorts of different awful things. But I hope that by leaving footprints in this landscape, political or otherwise, Toronto, Canada, whatever world I get to leave my footprints in, I can leave those footprints and help someone else feel less alone and more prepared. I can leave those footprints for someone to step in if they wish, the same way I stepped in my mom's footprints in the snow when I was a little girl. Thank you.